You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining us this morning here at CBT News and Inside Automotive. It's been a few weeks since the election, and it seems like we are starting to get some additional information on what the next 4 years may hold. That seems like a good place to start. Here to weigh in is Ryan Kerrigan, Managing Director of Kerrigan Advisors. Thank you, Ryan, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us on the show once again.
Jim, good to be with you.
Sure. So I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving break.
Yes, we did.
That's right. Lots to be thankful for in this industry that we are both in, right?
No question.
Things are fun to watch. But so let me ask you this: how does the election of a few weeks ago impact our industry? I mean, we're talking, Trump's out there talking about tariffs on everything from parts and cars and you name it. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to digest. Obviously, we all got surprised by a more decisive election victory than most anticipated, carrying the Senate and the House with him on the Republican side. So, yeah, I mean, a lot to react to. And, generally speaking, I'm sure you run in very similar circles. Business people are generally pretty excited about the what ifs, what Trump could do.
That's right.
Reducing, sort of the size of government, trying to reduce some regulation, maybe revisiting tax policy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The flip side is that tariffs are just a big part of the conversation. And there's no question that has very significant implications for our industry. To quote someone that I read a few weeks ago, there is no such thing as an American car. That is, this is a global supply chain. We have American companies, we've got American brands, we have some plants producing cars in the United States. But this notion that there's an American car,
that's right.
It's a big global supply chain. Certainly, some cars there's more value add in the production of some vehicles in the United States than others. But this notion that we just can sort of, put up these big barriers and protect, quote unquote, the American car industry, it's not nearly that simple. So these are big questions.
That's right. And this does play into a trade war, right?
Yeah, I mean, already, so how does this play out? So maybe in the short run, there are some benefits to protecting an industry. Normally, though, if you just kind of look over the course of history, it often leads to then decisions on the part of other countries to protect their industries, in which case net everyone ends up worse off. That's just kind of classical economics. We're seeing this play out already. I mean, yesterday, for example, China announced that a bunch of rare earth materials would be banned from export to the United States, for example. Wow. So this game is starting. It started yesterday formally with that sort of counterpunch.
That's right.
Mexico has also indicated, interestingly, so I guess we've seen two very divergent reactions just in the last week. On the one hand, you had the Prime Minister of Canada hurriedly flying down to Florida to get some FaceTime with Trump to figure out, let's talk about this. By contrast, the president of Mexico in recent days did the opposite. He made a public statement and saying, hey, there's going to be consequences to some kind of big tariff situation. I don't really know what tools she has vis-a-vis the U.S. economy, but she's taking a position that this is not a one-way conversation.
That's right. That's right. And the EV industry has relied heavily on the tax credit. What does Trump's election mean for EVs?
It's a great question. He is interestingly a big EV critic, and at the same time, of course, sort of in this deep relationship and friendship with Elon Musk. So kind of hard to put that all together. But he has been very critical of the EV tax credits, the $7,500. Those do sunset they were authorized through January of 2026. So in about a year, that will sunset. I know for certain models, some of those things are running out as well. It is very possible that very substantial subsidy goes away inside the year.
Yeah, for sure. What position is the auto industry taking on these proposed policies? I mean, what can we see?
Yeah. So, hey, you got to be careful when you've got sort of a big tide rolling in. And right now you've got, Trump, again, along with control of both houses of Congress. There's a lot of momentum there. And there is legitimate sort of interest on the part of the business community. What are the positive things that might come out of the Trump administration? That said, putting up blunt tariffs, for example, could be wildly disruptive. And so to answer your question, I can speak a little bit for AIADA, an organization that we're very involved with. I just had a chance to attend their board meeting, and they're taking the position appropriately around affordability. Ultimately, tariffs and trade wars harm affordability. And that's a big issue for our industry as it stands. We're looking at average selling price pushing $50,000. It's something that we've been talking about prior to this.
Oh, yeah.
So anything that we do around sort of trade restrictions is probably going to impact that. So that's the position that at least one industry organization is taking, saying, okay, we want to give this new Trump administration some time to kind of come up with their policies, and we'll talk about it, but let's keep an eye towards affordability. And ultimately, this is about sort of, again, to use the phrase, make America great again. That's about sort of protecting our consumers, allowing our consumers to kind of, not live in a world with nearly as much inflation, and bringing down sort of cost of living. And so that fits into this. Yeah.
And these policies represent some major changes in the industry and to dealers in particular, right?
Yeah, no question. I mean, and dealers, of course, can adapt their business model quite well. We see that time and time again, but ultimately it's a thin margin business. And so when you start seeing, discussion of 25, 50, 100%, numbers being thrown around, we can even talk about the 200% number that was thrown around if you want. I mean, this is really, really impactful, and maybe the net impact on the industry might be muted. One car becomes much more expensive, and maybe people just shift to a different car.
Right.
But for a given dealer who's not representing all makes, it could be very, very impactful depending upon where your vehicles are being made.
That's right. And the big question is, are these tariffs real? Because you hear some people, some analysts and talking heads that go, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. That's the way that he gets these people and gets these countries to the table, to the bargaining table. He's not really going to he's not going to impose these tariffs on these products. What do you say to those people out there?
Well, I'll tell you, Trump says a lot of things, can take different positions at different times. We've seen that. But he's been talking about trade policy since the 1980s. I mean, this is actually the one issue that he has been very vocal and public on and consistent on for his entire public life.
Yeah.
And so this is something that's more than reacting to kind of the current moment, reading some polling, trying to, running an election campaign. I mean, this is really core to his political identity. And so I do take him very seriously. Obviously, we never take him literally, but I do take him very seriously on this. This is not something that he's going to quickly, extract a concession from someone and the issue just goes away. I don't see it that way at all.
Right. Yeah, he's serious about it. So it's just a question of, there will be tariffs. It's a question of how much and what products. But I agree with you. And he's made, during his the election and the campaign, I should say, he was out there saying, I love the word tariffs. It's my favorite word. It's a beautiful word. So I agree with you. And when you do see those videos of him, even with Phil Donahue in the 70s and the 80s and Oprah and all of the others, where you're right, he did talk about trade and tariffs and all that goes into that. I mean, you're right. Yeah. This has been one of those issues, even more than immigration, that's always been front and center with him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is really core to his rise. And, it's interesting to say tariff is a beautiful word. It's quite, I think most of us in the business community have been trained and have come to realize just sort of the greater good of having, free trade and all that kind of things. Of course, you need to be protecting intellectual property and things like that and being sensible. So it's a real reversal of a consensus that we've had in this country for a long time, for literally a couple generations, and then to go back to this notion of it sounds kind of 1920s, not 2020s.
Yeah, for sure. And he's talking about 200% on tariffs, coming out of or imports, out of Mexico. That's incredible. 200%.
He floated that number. He was doing an interview on Fox News, I believe, and And he did sort of back up and say, "I'm just using that as a number," which I thought was a kind of a funny, kind of a funny way of putting it.
Right.
But it does sort of indicate the seriousness and the extreme positions that he is willing to articulate
Yeah.
in order to cut what he believes to be a better deal, a more fair deal for U.S. citizens and for American workers. That's kind of
Right.
where he's coming from.
Maybe he's just mad that they didn't pay for the wall, and he's thinking, I'm going to get it through the tariffs.
Yeah.
So, so to revisit our prior conversations about EVs, what is the industry update there?
Yeah, well, much ado about nothing, right? So we now have 3 quarters of data for 2024.
Right.
We're up 1.3% year over year. We're still under 8% market share. So we
Yeah.
got up to that kind of 6-7% market share relatively quickly in this transition. Of course, there were those that said it was going to go from that level up to 60%, 70%, 80% and more. And we're capped in that like 7% range. And
Yeah.
so pretty remarkable. I mean, this is supposed to be a massive new growth vector for this industry.
Yeah.
Nothing at 1% growing 1% year over year. I mean, that's not even population growth. It's certainly not inflation growth.
And then Tesla owns a large share of that share.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and that's on the heels of multiple $100 billion of investment that have gone into these programs in the last 5 years. You and I have talked about this in prior sessions, and I mean, the return on this investment has just been absolutely anemic. And so, yeah, we just continue to see, and we will see more products. I mean, there's been commitment to these big product lines that are coming out ever so slowly, and most of them delayed. So I suspect that those numbers will move up marginally, just given supply. There's just going to be a lot of EVs that are built in the next year or two. But in terms of a real wholesale change in our industry and how we're delivering cars and what people are buying, we're just not seeing it.
Right, right. So if I'm a dealer and I'm sitting here in my 60s, which I am in my 60s, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, with all of this being said, with all of this that I'm hearing between EVs and tariffs, and I just came out of COVID and all of this stuff that we're faced with, this might be a good time to pack it in, take my check, and move to the lake. How is this impacting the buy-sell market from your perspective?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's really amazing. I mean, notwithstanding high interest rates, notwithstanding political uncertainty, now we're talking about tariffs. There's infinite reasons why buy-sell activity could have been down a lot in the last couple of years. And many other industries did see M&A activity fall a lot. When interest rates started being put up in 2022, M&A activity did go down in a lot of sectors. We just haven't seen it in automotive retail. So through the first 3 quarters of this year, 330 buy-sells. That's another record for the industry. So the buy-sell market remains incredibly robust, notwithstanding all of these sort of uncertainties and headwinds. And then, why is that the case? It takes buyers and sellers, of course. So what's animating the buyers? Sellers. Let me restate that. What's animating the sellers? Sellers they've made a lot of money. I mean, to the degree, a lot of us in business kind of have maybe a number in the back of our mind. Like once I get to this level,
exactly,
I'm probably able to sustain myself.
Sure.
I can kind of do what I want to do. And, in COVID, obviously those numbers got accelerated fast. And of course, human nature, we push the number up at the same time. But nevertheless, I mean, there's been a lot of wealth creation, so certainly that has eased the process along.
Yeah.
Our Blue Sky report is going to come out next week, and one trend that we talk about is just the cost of facilities. So real estate is very, very expensive, and construction costs are extraordinarily expensive.
Yeah.
And OEM requirements on real estate are not diminishing. And so if you look, for example, at the cost to build, if you look at, for example, rent for vehicles sold, that continues to go up. And there are a lot of dealers who are relatively close to that sort of decision to sell, to retire, and they're staring down the barrel of a really, really substantial investment, a multi-million-dollar renovation, in some cases a new build, which can be 10, 20, 30, $40 million, depending on the circumstances and the location.
Yeah.
It's a really big project to take on. And there's no way to really bring down construction costs right now. I mean, they just are exceedingly high. So we view that as being certainly one thing that sellers are thinking about, and as they think about how long they want to be in this business, and do they want to commit to a 3 to 5 year process of investing tens of millions of dollars in a new facility?
Right. And they're obviously coming to terms, with the buyers that are out there, right? I mean, who's leading the charge on the buyer side?
Yeah, and so the buyers are much more comfortable right now than they have been in recent years. In the last number of years, times were good, profits were high. If you're a buyer, like, how in the world do I underwrite this? If I want to be competitive, if I want to buy good stores, but I'm terrified of overpaying because I just know that what's going on today is probably not going to persist.
Yeah.
Well, here we are. I mean, we're sort of looking at 4 or 5 quarters in the rearview mirror of very consistent earnings. If you look at the Publix, for example, the Publix have larger stores versus the NADA average. And the Publix have been averaging right around $1 million per store for the last 5 quarters. So that is, I think, a very good indicator for where the industry is. How that money is made has frankly shifted around. The new car department has continued to get tighter, but there's been ways to offset that in other places. But that's a good framework for buyers to think about valuation. So we actually find buyers to be more decisive today in what they're willing to do, whereas there was a lot of indecision and a lot of even FOMO, I would say, saying, gosh, like, I just can't put a full multiple on these earnings because I just can't get comfortable that these earnings are going to persist.
Right.
Today, I got it. You know what? I can pay a full multiple. Just put a couple of Toyota and Lexus dealerships under contract in the last week or two. And, because these things aren't coming up that much, I had multiple prospective buyers underwrite them at current earnings and then put a real premium on them, well above the multiples that we would put out for Toyota and Lexus, just because they were great stores, great opportunities.
Yeah,
and they were willing to lean in.
Of course. Yeah. Who are some of the winners in the auto right now at the moment? And what's up with Carvana? I mean,
I'd hope that we would talk a little bit about Carvana. A little bit outside the new car space, of course. So we don't spend a lot of time on them. But my gosh.
What a comeback
this morning! $53 billion market cap. That is in line with the market cap of General Motors.
Unbelievable! What a comeback!
They have about 5%, 8% of the revenue of General Motors, but a market cap in line.
Yeah.
Compare that to, for example, AutoNation, market cap of like $7 billion. So just remarkable. This is a stock that they were in some real financial straits as recently as 24 months ago. I looked in early 2023, you could have bought this stock for under $5.
I know.
Yesterday, it traded at $255. I hope you bought a bunch, Jim. It's been a good run.
If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Well, then I'm glad you didn't buy any.
There you go. There you go.
Right, guys. I think it's fascinating, and what I take away from it is just the size of this industry. So they're not even playing in the new car space, and very modestly in sort of other elements of automotive retail. I mean, they are a used car business, and doing it with a different, a slightly different approach to going to market. They have about 1% market share, and they've built a $50 billion market cap company. So it's just to me a great reminder, the size of our industry, the dynamism, the ability to make money. And even with a company that comes in and sort of is able to build a company of that size, you and I don't know anyone that's gone out of business because of Carvana. I mean, they've nibbled, and so
that's right.
Everyone's maybe lost a few sales to them, but it's just such a big industry that you can have something as big as Carvana happen. And accommodate it. And I used the analogy before. You go back to CarMax, for example. CarMax built a Fortune 500 company, been very successful, very profitable.
Yeah.
At the time, it was all about disruption, and oh my gosh, the new car dealers are going to get pushed out of the used car business.
Yeah,
they're just part of the ecosystem.
That's right. Out well. That's right.
It's just a massive industry.
That's right. And I think there was some. I think a lot of dealers had this wake-up call because of Carvana in the way that they do business. And of course, we saw digital retailing on the rise, or modern retailing, call it what you will. But at the end of the day, if somebody can pick up their phone or go to their laptop and buy a car and have it delivered to their front door, dealers, I think, took note and said, wait a minute, how can we come up with a way to do just that? Because it appears as though consumers like that way of doing business. And we're not negotiating on the car, and the financing is easy, and the delivery is easy, and let's get on with our life, rather than spending 5 or 6 hours in a dealership on a Saturday and haggling back and forth. So I think there was some good lessons learned on the new car side or the franchise dealer side from a Carvana, from somebody that said, we think we can do this a little bit better?
Yep, I completely agree. I think that sometimes it takes industry outsiders to come in, disrupt a bit, show that it really can be done better. And I agree with you. I had a recent dealer experience, just personally. I walked in, it was one of the best dealer experiences that I've had. I mean, I walked in, the efficiency of it. There was something specifically that I wanted to test drive, and I was in and out in 25 minutes, and half of that was driving the car.
You mean, and you bought the car in 25 minutes?
I did not. No, I did not buy the car.
But you're only there 25 minutes, and you drove the car and got. Yeah. That's good. That's good.
And and those of us in the industry, often we sort of buffer ourselves from the true retail experience.
That's right.
Because we don't trust it.
Right.
And so it's not often that I would go in without the benefit of a dealer or a general manager knowing, and then of course on a friendly basis, they're going to take care of you. I called, set up the appointment. I kind of did it, frankly, as a bit of a test, just like, how as a consumer will I be treated? And I must say that I came away, very pleasantly surprised. And I think it goes back to some of those consumer experiences that have been pushed on the industry from the outside.
Consumers still complain about how long it takes to buy a car when they go into a dealership. And it's what keeps a lot of people away from the showroom, even though they know they got to shop or their lease is up or what have you. I've got friends of mine that are like, I just don't want to go into a dealership. I mean, I think about that and it's like, I'm going to be there all day. And for some reason, a lot of dealerships have not learned that you gotta pick up the pace. You got to get them in, you got to get them out, especially when that customer goes, yes, I'll take it. I love the whole deal. I'll take it. And then 3 hours later, it's absolutely crazy. What are we doing to these people? But
and I think, and because F&I is an important part of the dealership model, if you can't provide that efficient experience inside the dealership, I think it challenges the F&I model, because what does that force people to do? People are just going to make you deliver the car. Like they're just going to find ways to get the car delivered, which then makes it more difficult, particularly given compliance and regulation and things like that.
That's right.
To do F&I, and consumers consistently purchase F&I. They find it valuable. Of course, it's an important stream for dealers because often those new car margins are slim to none. And so to me, it's like improving that dealership experience is critical to maintaining the F&I business model.
That's right. Let's talk about GM. GM expects more than $5 billion impact from China restructuring, and they're closing plants. What say you on this?
Yeah, that got announced today. And, there's been, for those paying attention, there's been a lot of talk now for a number of years about what the Chinese call dual circulation. And it's their formulation for just really, ironically, doing what we're now trying to do, which is onshoring. They've onshored the production. They've been making vehicles. They've been making everything for a long time. But increasingly controlling and having Chinese companies selling to Chinese consumers, and then marginalizing the Western companies. And this has been a stated policy. When they came out with it, it seemed a little hard to even believe, given the presence of massive American and European companies in China, but they have absolutely begun to execute on that. So you see the role of Western auto manufacturers decreasing. You're seeing a lot of pressure on those partnerships. And then you're just seeing, in general, just kind of margin compression in China as well. And so it's a great big squeeze going on. General Motors had a very successful run. They've been making a couple $2 billion a year in that JV. And that is just, it's not profitable in 2024. They took a $5 billion charge, as you just mentioned. Half of that was around restructuring, and half of that was around impairment of what they carry that investment at. And so this is, we're in the middle of this process of some real disengagement between particularly the Chinese domestic economy and some of our very large companies in the U.S., including our auto manufacturers.
For sure. Last time that you joined me on the show, you're with Michael Dunn, who is the foremost authority, I guess, on all things automotive in China. And the numbers that he shared with our viewers was really an eye-opener, I think, for many. A lot of the comments that we got back was, whoa, these guys are coming after us in a very big way. They really own the EV market on a global basis, don't they?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. No, it's exactly right. As we talked about with Michael, this is a big industrial push for China. They want to be very, very dominant in automotive, specifically in EV, but automotive broadly. And so it's interesting that they're pushing the Western manufacturers out of China at the same time that they're trying to come into all kinds of markets. Of course, they'd love to come into the US. We've got very high tariffs. That's where that Mexico thing gets really complicated, because you see a lot of Chinese investment into Mexico, hoping to perhaps use the NAFTA accords to bring more Chinese parts, more components, if they could, ideally full-on cars, into the US. And so it creates a whole nother border dynamic for us on the southern border.
That's right. Hey, we did pick up a Senate seat kind of with a car dealer, which is Bernie Moreno out of Ohio. So it's it's great that we've got a car guy, so to speak, in the U.S. Senate, right? That's pretty cool.
No, hey, there are 100 U.S. senators. They all have very significant influence, because it takes 60 in the Senate to move anything along.
Sure.
So unlike the House, where if you're in the majority, you've got a lot of power. If you're in the minority, you've got very little.
Right.
Senators have a disproportionate level of influence, and having one of the individuals at the table that knows our industry as well as Moreno, that is not a small deal.
But I mean, really, you're right. They're going to be turning to him, going, "Hey, what's the deal on the on the auto market out there, and what's a dealer's perspective on this, and what are the OEMs thinking?" And so, it's great having him in there for sure.
Yeah. No, I think it's very significant for the industry.
No question. And he's good friends with Trump, so that's if he's got Trump's ear, maybe he can talk some sense into him as it relates to all these crazy tariffs that he's thinking about, right?
Yep.
So
well stated. I agree with that.
Yeah. Ryan Kerrigan, Managing Director of Kerrigan Advisors. That's a company that that is the kind of the gold standard out there for all things M&A. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. Very much appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Talk soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.